it is somewhat foolish for us to consider that this will continue with no correction in the market. Like, there will be a dip. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to your 2025 stock market wrap, where we're going to look at what happened in 2025 and our projections in 2026. This is the first one of these videos that I'm making that's going to be longer form content. As you know, I do post a short form content every day of what happens in the stock market and all the latest news. But here we're going to look at the year. And 2025 was a crazy year for the stock market and honestly the news in general. And that is why we had a lot of volatility in the stock market. We had a lot of ups and downs due to all this crazy news. One day we would have these tariffs and the next we wouldn't. And then one day we would be at war and one day we're not. I'm going to go through three main things. One, all the tariff news that happened and what that's going to look like in 2026, because that's going to be a very key factor. Two, the general market performance and recovery. That includes everything that happened with the S&P 500, all the tech stock drives, and what that's going to look like in 2026. And finally, we're going to talk about everything else that affected the market, like the Federal Reserve, interest rates, everything. Without further ado, let's start off with the tariff news. I have my notes here with me, and I broke down everything that happened. Let's start off with the tariff news. In the spring of 2025, the Trump administration introduced Liberation Day, essentially aggressive and broad amount of tariffs on all the countries the United States mainly does trade with. That includes Canada, that includes China, that includes Mexico. These are three countries that the US relies heavily on. And once this was announced, this triggered one of the biggest sell-offs in the market since 2020 when COVID hit, which is really, really insane. However, like I always say, with huge market sell-offs comes a lot of opportunity on the recovery. And we had insane drops with this. We had the S&P 500 dropping 5 to 6% on a daily session. Like, that is unheard of. That is insane. And that brought a lot of volatility to the market that the stock market held all the way through at the end of 2025. And now, while all this happened, we saw a tariff pause in April 2025, a couple weeks after, really. And the market recovered. It erased virtually all the losses that it had seen earlier. And that was a huge gain for a lot of investors who entered the market when it was down. And it really forced investors to look at corporate earnings rather than the general stock market for a lot of their trading. And that's something that doesn't happen too often. A lot of times in the stock market, what I've noticed in my experience is that the market determines everything. And that is still the point right now. The market does determine a lot. Unless you are an NVIDIA coming out with, crazy news, more times than not, you're not going to get a huge reaction if the market's going to be down. If there's a red day in the market, you're typically not going to get a good increase, even if you're a company that has amazing earnings. And that is something that we didn't see much of, at least in that point in 2025, is we saw a lot of people looking at actual earnings for companies, which is a huge change. And economists widely believe that tariffs were going to push up inflation due to all the imported prices of the produced goods. Now, that was 2025. What is that going to look like in 2026? Well, the Supreme Court is actually suing the Trump administration as we speak regarding this whole tariff situation. And it could see $100 million in rebates going to the American people. That's roughly like $2,000 a person, I think is the estimate last time I checked. And if the Supreme Court wins this and the people get the checks, that is going to be a huge play for the market, as two things happen. One, with each person having $2,000, spending goes up, and two, investing goes up. So we're going to see a lot more money coming into the stock market as well. Now, obviously, it's not billions of dollars and it's not crazy, but it is good. And more than anything else, what it does is it secures us reassurance that there will not be tariffs going further into 2026, as once that happens, any other tariffs that the Trump administration puts on countries will be reversed. And that'll be great. And that'll mean no more sharp drops and random news, at least tariff-wise. There's still a lot more. Now, let's go into the market. The S&P 500 rose 17% last year. That is insane. Now, this is a third consecutive robust positive year for the stock market. And that is showing some market strength, but it should signal a bit of hesitation for everyone. The NASDAQ gained nearly 20% this last year. It is somewhat foolish for us to consider that this will continue with no correction in the market. Like, there will be a dip. Everyone is waiting for this bubble to burst, and more specifically, the tech bubble. Let's get into that. There was a massive rally in AI stocks, and NVIDIA was the forefront runner all of 2025. NVIDIA pretty much took the tech market on its back and went fully through with a bunch of billion-dollar partnerships, billion-dollar investments, getting their H200 chips released and potentially getting them approved by the Trump administration, which I think it's going to happen, connecting so closely with the Trump administration, and the whirlwind of news that NVIDIA has released, all the good earnings that they have put out that have honestly surprised everyone. To be honest with you, it has been as much of a shock to me as it is to you. And I'm going to disclose something here. I was an investor in NVIDIA. There was a point where I thought, you know what? This stock is a little too overvalued for my liking to hold it here. And I did sell off some of my shares here. But to be honest, when I look at the last earnings they put out, I'm still impressed. And the long term of the stock remains very, very well intact. And it has surprised me. The CEO has surprised me and the company has surprised me. Definitely one of those stocks that I have on my list that I'm checking and I would love to hold long term. Now, to get into the conversation of the whole bubble of tech stocks, that bubble is very apparent to everyone in the market. There's been a lot of hesitations. Remember, Oracle just lost their biggest backer for their data centers a couple weeks ago. And if it wasn't for their TikTok deal, Oracle would be down in the dumps right now. The investors are not as willing to invest in tech anymore. And they're seeing the bubble getting ready to burst here. And to be honest with you, I think it will burst in 2026. I just don't necessarily see how it can continue to go up. With that being said, companies like NVIDIA, I feel, are more secure as tech stocks, whereas some companies like, if you would look at IonQ, which is a quantum computing company, but the quantum computing is built off of potential, not necessarily current success. And it's being valued with the fact of having current success. So companies like that, I think, are going to go down. But companies like NVIDIA, even if they are going down, I don't think that they're going to be down for long. And I don't think that they're unrecoverable. I think NVIDIA is going to be a big, big player in the tech market long term, same as Meta, same as Oracle, and same as Alphabet. Lastly, let's get into the Federal Reserve and everything that they did over the last year. The Federal Reserve cut interest rates multiple times in 2025 in response to slowing growth and inflation risks. And that has been something that has been a big back in the market for now. That is not a long-term fix though. And we see a hesitation from Fed and Jerome Powell. Almost every single one of the votes for interest rates was split really, really close. And what we're going to see in 2026, and currently right now for the month of January, there's an 84% bet that there won't be an interest rate cut. And all eyes are on by March what happens. But I think the March interest rate cut is going to be more what people look at. But let's not forget that we cut interest rates a lot in 2025. And that was a big, big, big boost for the market. Do I necessarily think that that's going to be a continuous thing in 2026? I don't think so. I don't think we're going to get as many cuts. I mean, I really think that 2026 from the Federal Reserve part, they're going to be more cautious. And I think that will weigh heavily in the market. And I think the Federal Reserve recognized that this might be a down year, but that could be all false. But with everything, we can have great news in the market that pumps the market and further grows the American dollar. And speaking of the US dollar dropped this year significantly. It has dropped probably the most since early 2020s. And that's one of those signs that investors should take in and use as a kind of guiding symbol for 2026. And obviously we had the gold surge, which was insane, doubled over the start of the year, which is wild to me. But yeah, we had strong year for gold and some other commodities. And I think that that'll continue in 2026. And 2025 also came with a lot of corporate stress as a lot of corporations filed bankruptcy this last year. And that just reflects economic stress and general cost pressures. A lot of companies are also not happy with the administration. You have companies like Costco suing the administration. And regardless of what party you support, that's not necessarily what's important. That's not what we're talking about here in this video or any future videos. Let me get that straight. What we're talking about here is a general, what does this mean for the market? And one thing I have noticed with the Trump Organization, to their credit, is that with the Trump Organization, the stock market does typically rise, but it also comes up with a lot of news at random moments and a lot of geopolitical issues arise. And it's kind of shocking. You never really know what's going to happen the next day. So for us to sit here and say, for all intents and purposes, 2026 does look like it could be a correction year. From what I've noticed with this administration is that that's not necessarily always the case. And things can turn like that even when you think there's no hope. So to wrap all this up, 2025 was a great year. We saw a lot of gains, but we saw a lot of ups and downs. Expect to see a lot of ups and downs in 2026. Don't expect all that to go away. I would only say that be careful because the Federal Reserve will not be as lenient as it was in 2025. In 2025, votes were split, and we're already going to be seeing that some of those votes might go against the interest rate cuts this time around. Although Jerome Powell has said that he's interested in interest rate cuts in 2026, that doesn't necessarily mean that there's going to be. So please be careful. And thank you guys for watching this video. I will be making weekly videos of the stock market wrapped. And if you guys leave in the comments what stocks you want analyzed, I will go into that and analyze those for you guys. But for now, peace.